Well, hi, everybody. I am Dave Elsner, the tech sales coach. And the best advice I ever got is as a sales leader, you're just a member of the team with a different purpose to help and enable and remove roadblocks and participate with the team as a member, not as the person that tells everybody what to do. And I got to say, the worst advice that I've ever gotten is ABC, always be closing. Buyers don't like it, and they see it coming a mile away nowadays. And so I don't say always be closing. I say always be working to help your customer achieve their goals.
Wow. Those that let's start with the great advice there. So when did you happen upon that, Dave? Who gave you that, and how did that help you?
Yeah, it's when I first got promoted. I spent about 8 years in sales, technical sales. Back in the day, that was phone systems. And so my first promotion, my first boss, his name was Ed Kaler. And Ed did a great job of mentoring and coaching me to be a very successful sales manager. And that was one of his first pieces of advice was, that you're a member of the team. You're there to help remove roadblocks. There to help coach them, enable them. And you just have a different role, but it's still one team.
Yeah, cool. Well, before we talk about that worst advice there a little bit, I just want to share. I think that's so important that sales leaders don't get too detached from where they started, right? I mean, we always have to remember, ultimately, our customer is the rep. We have to help the rep. We have to enable the rep. I mean, the sales enablement starts with the leader. Is that what you've seen as well, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a sales leader, you're doing a lot of internal selling to get the things that you need to support your team and make them more successful. And so that's just one of the many roles, motivator, the person provides recognition, the person that gets the team to work harmoniously together. In that I mean a lot of top salespeople don't like to share what they do to be so successful, but you've got to create a team environment where everybody's open with, the things that they're doing that work to help raise everybody up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Do you think that also some of the top sales reps don't share what they know because they don't think that it's special? They just think it's what everybody does, and they don't think they have magic. Or do you think that they think that they actually do something different?
I would say it's because they're so competitive and they want to be that
Okay.
top salesperson on the team. At least in my experience, I'm sure there's a little of what you said there, but primarily in my experience, it's because they're so darn competitive.
Wow. Cool. Cool. So with that, you talked about the team environment. We'll get to the ABC in a little bit here, but that team environment is absolutely so important. We're talking about a lot in a lot of cases, we're talking about those hyper competitive alpha dogs who often end up by themselves. So is that to get them to work together? I mean, is that does that start with the hiring, or where does that start, Dave?
I think it starts in the team meetings. I've walked into a few sales teams that there was a lot of stress and strain amongst the team members. And so I think part of your regular agenda needs to be success stories, talking about what's working and what's not working to raise the rest of the team up together.
Yeah, and I'm all for that, and I find that if we do that every week and we just make that a continuous practice, we find a lot more success if we grab those calls and we grab those recordings so that we know what the rep is doing, and then sharing that out and contextualizing that for the team each and every week. That's super important. So how do we do we get reps to self-identify those? I mean, do we just go in and only look at closed ones to then backtrack that and find the recordings, Dave? Or how do we do that?
You mean as far as getting them to share?
Yeah, yeah, as far as getting the share, yeah, and getting that breakdown so that they focus on those principles more than just the practice and being luck.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you find is that you kind of chip away at those people. You get them to tell a story about how a deal flowed from beginning to end. You get them to tell a story about how they found so much opportunity. And so that kind of sharing, and caring amongst the team, I think, is what raises everybody up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So cool. So we're doing that, right? We're sharing it out there. Do we need to reward reps for that? Because sometimes, we want to, our top reps, to your point about being competitive, they just want to close, right? They want to be ABC, right? That's their goal. They want to be closing, not necessarily every call, but I mean that's ultimately their goal. So how do we incentivize that to make sure that works, or do we even need to incentivize that?
No, I absolutely think you do. I mean, we all know sales reps are operated, and it starts with money that they can then provide themselves, their families, a life. But one of the most powerful things is peer recognition. And so I think you always have to have that baked into your sales leadership plan is how are we going to recognize these people for their efforts? And we're going to do it amongst their peers. Um, there's no better reward than hearing your name called out in an audience for being the best at something.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. So cool. Well, let's move to that ABC there that you talked about. The always be closing bad advice. Nobody likes that. I mean, I would argue even as a rep, having to always ask for the sale can be problematic. So where does that ABC? Is that just old school thinking? Because I haven't run into a ton of reps that do that anymore. Maybe they do that in their head, but they're not you know visibly doing that. So where do they even get that? Is that just because they watched too much Glengarry Glen Ross, or what?
I do really think it's old school. I came up in a time where we used sales tactics, right? We qualified deals. We wanted to know about budget, authority, the need, and the timing. But things have changed. The modern buyer, I think, when you try those kinds of tactics, they put up a block wall and they're not open to you. And so you've really got to turn the tables and be more focused on them and their goals. And I often say the salesperson that cares the most wins the most. And really, what you have to do is be goal focused, understand what they want to accomplish, what outcomes, and then design your entire sales process with them around being buyer centric. And so, therefore, I want to understand what their buying criteria is and what their buying process is. And I want to help them on that journey to get where they need to go.
Yeah. We're partners. We're sitting on the same side here. We're trying to
Yeah.
solve problems, right? I believe the best salespeople, yeah, it's caring, and absolutely it's the ability to problem solve and to empathetically listen with our ears to find the impacts to those problems uh, as much as we can. So what gets in the way of that, Dave? Why don't all sellers just naturally just do that?
You know, to be quite honest, I don't know that sales forces are trained on good methodologies. And so what they're relying on is the experience of their manager, the experience of people that they've worked with over the years. And they don't have any formal process that they go through with a buyer. Therefore, the bad habits come out.
Mm.
I think even modern salespeople are taught the MEDIC and BANT. And when I talk to sales VPs about what sales methodology to use, those two things often come up, but those are just qualifying methods. Those aren't really a true buyer centric, selling method. And so I really think it comes down to lack of training, coaching, and mentoring. And therefore, salespeople have to rely on, what they learn from other people. I actually did a survey on LinkedIn recently asking, how did you learn how to sell? And the least votes came from the sales manager and sales training. The most votes came from mentors and other salespeople that they work with. And so, if that's any indication, it really comes down to We need sales managers to drive better execution. And we need to provide our sales teams with a common language sales method that everybody can practice together to achieve higher results.
Wow. So what give me an example of a good method that they could possibly use. I mean, you mentioned that Medic and Bant are just qualification methods. So give me
Right.
a good method. I mean, is there, a book, or is it your secret sauce here that helps these folks do this?
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in customer centric selling. I trained my entire 200-person sales force on that method in 2006, and we saw results improve in every category as a result of it. Now, I actually went one step further and started customizing that training because it wasn't identifying with my salespeople to sell a pin or a widget or this or that. And so I actually wrote my own solutions into the role plays, into what we call sales ready messaging. And I customized all the materials so that when they're doing the role plays, they're role playing real world stuff that they can take and put into effect right away. We also had very strong execution and reinforcement plans. It wasn't about sending them to a training event. It was about then reinforcing it over and over again by entering the sales stages in the CRM, for instance, and creating gates that the salesperson would have to gather this information, let's say before they get an engineer assigned to the account, so we're not wasting an engineer's time. And so, customer centric is all about being buyer centric and focused on the customer, their goals, and their outcomes. And it provides a great roadmap for the sales teams to execute against. Again, it's all about getting better results. So that's the atmosphere we want to drive.
Definitely. Definitely. So you mentioned role plays, and I've talked to reps. Sometimes they resist against those, but I'll tell you, there's no way for a rep to get reps by screwing up with live customers, because that just isn't good. You want to role play. So how do we create that culture where role plays are good? Because I've certainly been in both.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody likes to do role plays. I do a lot of them with my students for constant reinforcement. And so I think you need to step into it easily. You can't give them an end-to-end sales call role play. It needs to be, how do we get the customer's goals and outcomes, and then stop and then reinforce it. And then how do we do discovery, and then stop and reinforce it. And so I think you're taking a full sales call and breaking it down into easier steps for them to practice against until they can put it all together.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree. I think about, when I used to play baseball, you learn how to field a grounder, then you learn pop flies, and you learn how to swing the bat and make the right throw, and then hit the cutoff man, and all that different stuff. But we don't learn all of that, right? At one time. We don't put that all into play because that's just too much. I can't do that. There's 68 now moving parts, and that's just way too much.
That's funny. It reminds me, I taught my daughter when she was 5 softball. I was the softball team coach. And I taught them so much in our first 2 weeks of practice that when the first ball was hit against us, the entire team ran to the outfield to get the ball. And that's because I was so focused on, when that ball goes, you go. And I didn't break it down and take the proper steps to teach them.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, with my son is now almost 8 years old, and I remember that was unfortunately that I didn't get to help coach until we were a couple weeks in. So yeah, that's absolutely, let's all go to left field. Oh, and then we all go to right field. It's like swarm ball almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do we, breaking it down seems like, such an obvious thing. I mean, anybody who's done anything knows that it's about the combination of steps, not just the totality there. So how do we help reps really embrace that to really enable them to achieve higher?
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this briefly. I like creating what we call a no excuse sales environment. And that is that you have all the proper tools, people, process, and culture in place to make it easy on the salesperson to accomplish what you want them to accomplish. And I was thinking about it this morning, and in 2006, I actually built a sales process guide for my sales teams.
Wow.
Kind of ridiculous that it's a 3-ring binder from 2006. I'm sure it's all online now with learning management systems and stuff like that. But, this taught them everything that they needed to do their job effectively. And so, when it comes to tools, you got to have, the right customer relationship management tools. You got to have sales engagement platforms, collaboration tools, lead generation tools, proposal and contract management tools. And then from a people perspective, you got to give them sales training and coaching. You got to give them a marketing team that pulls data and generates campaigns and prepares that sales ready messaging that I talked about. It provides success stories and use cases. You need customer support, inside sales, sales engineering, and then process, clear performance expectations, active weekly coaching with performance reviews. Sales process needs to be understood. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. You got to do customer QBRs, have your annual planning. And then the most important thing, I think, for a team success is culture. You got to create a team that shares with each other. I call it the ultimate expectation. Do more than I ask you and share it with everybody. And you're probably smarter than me. So if you have an idea as to how I can improve things, tell me. And then, they've got to be accountable. You got to do recognition, and you need to keep them customer centric focused. So really, whenever I inherited or built a sales team, I thought about those 4 things and creating a no excuse sales environment. What tools will they need? What people do they need around them to be successful? What process will they use? And culture.
Yeah. Wow.
I know there's a lot.
That's great. Well, let's go into a couple of those for sure, because I think that is a lot, but I think it's it's able to be broken down so that we can talk about that. Let's talk a bit about some tools, because as a tech sales coach selling with salespeople who frankly are a little more technical, maybe they understand technology, at least maybe if they haven't embraced it. So what are some of the new tools, Dave, that you're starting to introduce into some of your coaching?
I'll tell you, there's some incredible AI tools being released right now. One of them basically transcribes an entire conversation I could be having with a potential client. And so I don't need to sit there and take notes. I can be focused on the customer. I can be focused on their outcomes, knowing that those notes are going to come after our conversation. And then from those notes, I can write a phenomenal follow-up letter that captures everything that the customer said. I'm also seeing some really good sales engagement platforms that are creating cadences for salespeople to save them time. Something that will flow through, like look at the LinkedIn profile, engage with their content, and it kind of guides the salesperson to the best practices necessary to create a prospect. And so there is some really, really neat stuff happening out there. I know that there's one company that even does coaching in the ear while somebody's on a call, and it judges the customer's attitude towards things and make recommendations about what you can say to improve your chances of success in that convo. It's kind of mind blowing, the stuff that's coming out now.
Wow. I mean, how do we get a rep used to that, though? I mean, they're not used to, that real time coaching. I mean, in some organizations, they're not used to any coaching. So that real time coaching has got to be kind of weird. How do we get the rep kind of used to that and still being present with the prospect?
Yeah, I think I would have difficulty having somebody chirp in my ear. I would rather, while I mention that this is out there, I think I would rather take the notes or the input after the conversation to improve the next conversation. But with all things, you get a rep to utilize this stuff because it saves them time so they can stay more focused on the customer. And that's really what it's about. All the CRM plugin tools that are out there, these things are saving us valuable time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, lots of cool tools there. So with that, let's go deeper into your ultimate expectation, because I think that, in a nutshell, I mean, if we can get that, we can absolutely win, right? We can coach our teams, we can enable our teams, because they'll then help each other. So let's dive back into that
Sure.
and go deeper on that, right? If we expect first they're going to share, that's really important, right? That's the first piece of that. And so, you talked about that early, but the second piece of that is often that they're going to be willing to give feedback to their sales leader. And that maybe hasn't been rewarded everywhere. So how do we even start that, Dave, when they've been, smacked in the head by previous sales leaders, for even if they've said that? How do we get that going so that they are willing to say those critical things, I guess, in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, I always presented the sales team with, hey, we've got this problem. We're not getting enough leads, in Southern California, let's say, and open it up for their ideas. What are the things that we can do as a team to improve everybody's results? And so I guess it's a fair amount of diplomacy. Even if I had my own ideas about what we wanted to do, I let the team generate the ideas first, because if you can get that buy-in to the actions they're going to take, they're going to execute better against those, ideas that you came up with.
Sure, sure. A rep who is bought in is a rep half coached, I believe. The more we can get that buy-in, the more open they are for that coaching, the more open they are for that sharing, the more open they are for trying new things and
That's right.
seeing what might be, right?
Yeah. And I don't think that sales reps like to be told what to do to be successful. We want it to be their idea, because people are convinced by things they come up with quicker than what we tell them to do.
Yeah, I like that. So with that, we want to create that culture of coaching, that culture of enablement. A first step, though, maybe for a sales leader who maybe hasn't been brought up in that, maybe that isn't even the culture of the team. If I want to start that bottom up with my team, out of the 10 sales managers that we have, where should I start that, Dave?
I think you got to look at, where can I save them time? When I was running Nexus, we had built a rather large public sector team. And what that meant is we had to do a lot of RFPs. And in order to help them with the time necessary to respond to an RFP, we came up with an RFP library. We came up with an RFP team that puts it together, and an RFP project manager. Therefore, a salesperson would bring an RFP to this project manager, and they would go get from the library and people all the information necessary to respond it and deliver back that RFP response to the salesperson, who would then clean it up, add their executive summary, and send it off to the customer. Where it took a salesperson, maybe a couple days to do an RFP in the past, now we've got a team of people and resources built for them to help them through that process. And we went from being able to do 50 RFPs a month to over 300 RFPs a month as a result. And our win rates, we learned from, what do we need to position and what price do we need to be at? We were winning 50% of our blind RFPs and 70% of our engaged RFPs. And it became a huge engine that helped fuel our growth.
Wow. Wow. So besides having a team to do that, I mean, what's the secret there, Dave? Is it the wording? Is it the tech? What's the secret?
Well, the secret to winning is, having a competent response to the RFP that hits every area of or every requirement that they lay out, along with being a good price. But I think it also comes down to positioning and brand recognition with the customer. We spent a lot of time positioning ourselves with school districts by doing events or training on, how to get E-rate funds. And therefore we were seen as a subject matter expert, so that when they got those RFPs, whether or not we were talking to them, they knew that we were good at this area of business.
That's so interesting, because now, we might not put on educational events, but every blog post, every social media event, everything that we do all adds into that, because we're so virtual, and they end up, I think we've seen them very hesitant on webinars, because they end up just getting just a product demo anyway. We say that it's this, but it's not really that.
Yeah, and I do believe education still exists. I work with a company called Wi-Fi Hotshots that they do school safety systems. And so we did a very successful webinar for all of the school district executives and principals to expose them and let them know what tools are out there to create a lockdown system and a PA system and a emergency button on every teacher's chest. And so I do think that buyers, what they want is research and education. Yeah, you see it on LinkedIn, but if you want to connect with them, throw an event and teach them about it.
Awesome. Love that. Love that. So Dave, as we kind of wrap this up here, man, where should I'm a brand new sales leader, let's say, and I just have my first team. Where do I get started even coaching my team? How do I make sure that my first 30, 60, 90 days are super effective?
Yeah, I mean, I would follow what I laid out earlier, tools, people, process, and culture. I've actually got a list of the things that you need to think about when it comes to those 4 categories. And so I'll post it up on LinkedIn here in the next day or so. If you want to take a visit, connect with me on LinkedIn so you can see my posts, or shoot me an IM on LinkedIn and say you're interested in the list. I'd be glad to shoot it over. I think once you have that foundation of these are the 50 things I need to look at, you can start picking off the ones that are most important to you until you've built that full portfolio around your team to create that no excuse environment.
Love that. Love that. So Dave, you got tons of resources up at the techsalescoach.com. I certainly appreciate that. You're very, very willing to share on LinkedIn as well. So LinkedIn, your platform of choice, or is there anywhere else you spend any time, or encourage sales coaches and sales managers to spend time?
Yeah, I've also got a YouTube channel where we're putting many of these tips, tricks, and advice up. We're just in the process of building it, so there's only about 20 videos now. But if you subscribe to that, you'll start getting some good, valuable content. But LinkedIn is definitely my primary source. I spend probably an hour a day on LinkedIn engaging, providing content and information. And so if you want to tap into my experience, follow me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Great stuff, Dave. As always, as expected. Thank you, my friend. Again, folks, if you're listening, you're watching, go to the techsalescoach.com. Get to know Dave more. Go to LinkedIn, find Dave Elsner, Elsner, and get started. He's full of resources. You can do this, friends. Go check it out. Get going, building your tools and your people, your culture, and your processes. Thank you, Dave. Great stuff today.
All right, Phil. Thank you, man. This was fun.